This week in gaming, the PlayStation experience kicked off, bringing with it a whole slew of announcements. Retail leaks suggest that the Nintendo Switch will charge via USB-C. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has released a video game as part of the Hour of Code to encourage more kids to consider software development as a career. Spoiler alert, it's no Skyrim. Thanks to a corporate partnership, every Starbucks in the United States is now a Pokestop. Astroneer goes into early access on December 16th, Ubisoft executives have been found guilty of insider trading, and Lab Zero Games has teamed up with Studio Trigger to produce a sequence for their upcoming game Indivisible in order to save anime. This is 1RBC Gaming Weekly. First off, we have something incredible to show you. An Atari 2600 emulator built in Minecraft. In case you're unfamiliar with the concept of an emulator, what you should know is that it's a piece of software that mimics hardware so that you can run, Dreamcast games on an Android phone. This week, a certain fellow by the name of Seth Bling released a video showing off an Atari 2600 emulator that runs in plain old Minecraft. No mods required. It does have a couple of limitations. It only works with 4KB ROMs, and you can't really control the games. However, this thing does run them. Now, this is running incredibly slowly. While games on the 2600 running on original hardware would run at about 60 frames per second, on this emulator you'll get about 60 frames every 4 hours. This is one of the most impressive things I've ever seen built in Minecraft. Now bear in mind, this guy also created a functioning basic interpreter. Given enough time, he could probably make XKCD505 a reality. If you'd like to check out the project in greater detail, we'll have a link to the video on the post for this week's show at onerulebecool.com. Gamers in South Korea could be looking at a new set of consequences for hacking and cheating. An amendment to a law meant to promote South Korea's gaming industry has made the development and distribution of aimbots and other in-game hacks and cheats illegal, with very real punishments attached. If you're busted cheating in a game, you could be fined up to 50 million South Korean wons, that's around 40,000 US dollars, and you could face up to 5 years in prison. It's not surprising that South Korea's passed such a law. The video game industry is a big deal in South Korea. It's a major player in the economy and an important part of the overall culture. However, this law does raise some questions. Does all modification to a game constitute hacking? What if, for instance, you've modded a single-player game with multiplayer components? It's already known that game mods can be used to add content to a game. So what if a player makes content that's better than some of the DLC that's offered by the company that made the game in the first place? Could the company, seeing this as a threat to their sales of DLC, have a modder prosecuted? This law gives power to the industry, but that's not necessarily a good thing for consumers.
I'll be the one pulling the strings. Who is Sombra? You'll never know. Adios.
In gaming business news, Puppy Games has offered a bit of an update on their highly unusual business model, Patreon. If you were an early Humble Bundle connoisseur, you probably owned some of their games, such as Revenge of the Titans. For these humble veterans, alternate funding models are nothing new. They have had a Patreon since August 2014 in order to fund their game Battledroid. They set out with a goal of $5,000 a month to keep their studio running and the game in development. Unfortunately, they never surpassed 10% of their goal. Thus, Battledroid has been a long, slow time in development. This week, Puppy Games has offered an update, showing off a fresh world screen. According to an extra-long blog post, the game's underpaid main developer found it hard to find motivation to work on the game, until about a month ago, when motivation found him. Because the Patreon's been making a couple hundred a month, he has been working on Battledroid part-time, and now the game is making surprisingly quick progress. I really want to see Puppy Games succeed with their highly unusual business model. When Battledroid launches, they plan for it to be completely free. So, what do you think about this model? Would you be willing to pay, $1 every month to pay for a developer to work full-time on a game that you're interested in, and to see the game go free-to-play once it's actually finished. Would you prefer this to a Kickstarter or to pre-ordering a game? Hit us up on Twitter at OneRuleBeCool and let us know. We'll be happy to share your opinions on next week's episode. In other gaming business news, over in Japan, Final Fantasy XV has sold nearly 700,000 units on PlayStation 4. For the game's first week, that's pretty good, though it's not quite as strong as the launch sales for Final Fantasy XIII, which sold over 1 million copies on launch day in Japan. The long-awaited Final Fantasy XV has thus far gotten good critical and fan reception. Worldwide, it's seen over 5 million Day 1 sales, making it the fastest-selling Final Fantasy game thus far. To follow up on a previous story, this week Ubisoft executives have been fined 1.27 million euros for insider trading. The company came under scrutiny after some of their stock was sold off in 2013, shortly before Watch Dogs and The Crew were delayed. The delay of those games caused Ubisoft's stock to fall pretty dramatically. In order to save some of their money, executives from Ubisoft sold off the stock before the price drop. The AMF, or the Autorité des Marchés Financiers, ultimately judged Ubisoft's executives guilty and has fined them. So, moral of the story? Don't delay The Crew. At least, I think that's the moral of the story. Super Mario Run is coming out on December 15, 2016 for iOS. It represents Nintendo's next major foray into the world of mobile gaming. This time, it's an intellectual property that they actually care about. As is tradition for Nintendo, they've made another boneheaded decision. Super Mario Run will not be playable offline. In an interview with Mashable, Shigeru Miyamoto revealed that the game requires a connection to servers in order to run. He claimed it as a security measure and went on to specify that yes, it was indeed to prevent piracy. Super Mario Run is an endless runner starring Mario, naturally, and it'll cost $10 at launch. Frankly, I have no interest in it anymore. While I am sure that the game will eventually be on Android, I'm just not interested in purchasing a game so terribly shackled by DRM. What happens in 5 to 10 years when Nintendo decides that it's just not worth supporting the servers anymore? What happens when I'm in a terrible cheap airplane without internet access? To me, it's just not worth buying a game that's so very ephemeral, and that's a disappointment. I mean, I'd be more than happy to support Nintendo's attempts to bring their games to other platforms, especially because this represents games that are being sold instead of handed out piecemeal in exchange for microtransactions, but by employing draconian DRM, Nintendo is only going to drive away legitimate customers. Pirates will always find a way around DRM. Remember SimCity? Remember Denuvo? Remember Securom? Yeah, all hacked. In virtual reality news, this week the Oculus Touch was released. Now this peripheral costs $200 and is a controller designed specifically for use with virtual reality games. One of the issues that VR has encountered has been one of input. What are better ways to move around in 3D space than mouse and keyboard or a controller? The Oculus Touch aims to solve the problem by letting you use your hands more naturally in virtual reality. The device can see your fingers, allowing you to grasp things, gesture, and do other such things in 3D space. Thus far, the device has gotten pretty good critical reception, and it does what it says on the box. It nicely expands the world of VR. Developer support for the device is pretty decent right now as well, with over 50 titles supporting the Touch. The Oculus Touch could be thought of as a more advanced version of the controllers meant for use with the HTC Vive. The Vive controllers have a similar design, but they don't do the gesture tracking that the Oculus Touch controllers can. From what I've been hearing, while these things are expensive, they're also well worth having. The 2016 PlayStation Experience happened early in the week. Now, in case you're unfamiliar with it, it's Sony's own press conference during which they make the big PlayStation-related announcements. It's basically an end-of-year PlayStation-only E3. During the show, some pretty big announcements were made. They opened with Uncharted: The Lost Legacy, a spin-off starring Chloe Frazer, who, no surprise, is chasing after an ancient artifact and trying to keep it out of the hands of some terrible villain. Standard fare. To go through some of the small announcements quickly, Gravity Rush 2 is getting free DLC in March that'll allow you to play as Raven. Ys Origin is coming to the PS4 and surprisingly not abandoned Vita on February 21st, 2017. Parappa the Rapper, Loco Roco, and Patapon are all being remastered for the PlayStation 4. There's a Parappa demo available to download right now on the PlayStation Store if you'd like to see how that game's coming along. And while we're talking about classic PlayStation titles, a new Wipeout is set to be released summer 2017. Now, if you're looking for a good puzzle platformer, Knack 2 is currently in development for PS4, and from what I've heard, it expands on its predecessor with improved gameplay and co-op. If you're into fighting games, you might be pleased to hear that Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite was announced during the PlayStation Experience. Currently in development for the Xbox One, PS4, and Windows, the game will feature a single-player campaign as well as an arcade mode and online multiplayer. Confirmed characters thus far include Ryu, Mega Man, and Morrigan on the Capcom side, and Captain America, Iron Man, and Captain Marvel on the Marvel side. So in case you're somehow unfamiliar with the franchise, Marvel vs. Capcom combines characters from both the Marvel and Capcom universes and pits them one against the other. It's like Street Fighter, but more comic-looking. Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite is set to be released in 2017. However, if you're feeling a bit impatient for some superhero action, Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 is available right now on the PlayStation 4. For those looking forward to Supergiant's next game, Pyre, a pretty important announcement was made regarding it at the PlayStation Experience. Pyre is going to feature multiplayer. In case you're unfamiliar with Pyre, it's a party-based RPG with a 1v1 competition that's like a dark version of basketball. Pyre is set to be released in 2017 for the PS4 and PC. While the multiplayer in the game is confirmed as local, the jury is still out on online multiplayer. Supergiant says that they've not yet decided on whether or not to implement it. After all, online multiplayer is notably more complicated than local. Now, I have played Pyre. I got to try it out at PAX East 2016, and I had a pretty good time with it. The game's story is interesting. It's got good voice acting. Logan Cunningham, who you know for his work on Bastion and Transistor, has returned yet again for Pyre. And the gameplay itself does lend itself surprisingly well to multiplayer, so I'm really looking forward to it. In game releases this week, the Triennial Game Collection came to Steam. This game is a compilation of 5 games from different developers. This includes Cardboard Computer, the folks behind Kentucky Route Zero. Now, each game in the compilation is an experiment in gameplay, design, narrative, that sort of thing. The Triennial Game Collection is available for Mac, Windows, and Linux for the beautiful price of free. So check it out if you're into experimental games. Personally, I've been meaning to try it out. I downloaded it. I just haven't quite gotten around to it yet. If you try it out and you like it, please be sure to let us know what you think. You can hit us up via Twitter at OneRuleBeCool. We'd be more than happy to share your thoughts on next week's episode. Winter sports game Steep was released on the Xbox One, PlayStation 4, and Windows this week. Published by Ubisoft, in Steep, you can ski, snowboard, and paraglide down the Swiss Alps, doing tricks and challenges and such. It's a stunningly gorgeous game. I don't care about sports games in the least, but Steep is just so achingly beautiful that I'm tempted to pick it up just because of how it looks. Thus far, Steep has gotten mostly positive reception from players and the press, but the game is not without its issues. It seems that the controls feel clunky and unresponsive at times, and there's plenty of mountain to ride, but the experience overall wears thin a little quickly, which is regrettable. The game, apparently, might have benefited from more content and polish. If you're looking for something that's on par with SSX, Steep might not be it. That said, I haven't heard that Steep is a bad game, just a good game that could stand to be better. After many, many years, The Last Guardian has finally been released. Directed by Fumito Ueda, who's famous for his work on Ico and Shadow of the Colossus, The Last Guardian isn't quite a sequel to those games so much as it is a spiritual successor, touching on similar themes and containing similar elements. The game stars a boy and his bird, dog, hyena, griffin creature. You solve puzzles and go on adventures together. Thus far, the game's gotten pretty good critical reception. Most criticism against The Last Guardian regards the game's occasional vagueness that leads on to frustration. Sometimes Trico, your pet, sometimes he just won't listen to you. This lends an organic quality to the game. Just like a real dog, he'll disobey you, but it can also be more frustrating than it needs to be. Generally, however, reception for The Last Guardian has been positive. There's been a lot of praise for the game's presentation, story, and characters. It's being hailed as an emotional odyssey. The issues with the game may have something to do with its protracted development cycle. Bear in mind, The Last Guardian was announced in 2007 and was supposed to be a PlayStation 3 game. Unfortunately, however, it seemingly died a few times before it was properly developed and released. Have you been playing The Last Guardian? If so, what do you think of it? Let us know on Twitter. The Last Guardian is available on the PlayStation 4. If you're a fan of Studio Ghibli, you might have heard of Ni no Kuni, a fantasy RPG that's been developed in conjunction with the beloved anime studio. Well, during the PlayStation Experience this year, a new trailer was released for the upcoming Ni no Kuni 2, and it seems to riff a little on Princess Mononoke. Enjoy.
Increase the taxes sixfold!
We've no need of love. Do you not agree?
My inventions will change the world!
What do you think you're doing? You'll take my little darlings with you, of course.
Kneel before the king of Ding Dong Down!
We'll build it together. A kingdom we can all be proud of.
Finally, we have a new trailer for the upcoming documentary Surviving Indie, which, as you may rightly guess, is about the struggles and triumphs of being an independent game developer.
Because you have to go to work or you have to go to school. There's no income. There's no game, there's no IP, there's nothing to be proud of. It's a void, and like the only thing that fills that void is your motivation to work on things.
There is no such thing actually as an overnight success. When you just begin to like peel off one layer, you can find that it's actually been the result of a lot of work. A great game designer is not someone that just has a great idea, but it's someone who, when they find out their first idea was terrible, has 100 more ideas to try.
There's definitely ebbs and flows. There's times when you're just so positive and everything seems to be looking up, and then the very next week you're like, what am I doing? I should just get a real job and stop pretending like I'm a game dev. I think that that's part of what makes you an artist, is that unknowing and that kind of like ebb and flow of self-confidence.
I had heard horror stories about Kickstarter, and I had heard amazing success stories. So I wanted to dig deeper and see what the more reasonable reality of Kickstarter was. It was definitely stressful for a while there. Me and my brother just kept persisting on because it was just so like gratifying to be able to work on that project that we just had to keep going at it.
Again, I was back in this situation where I had no place to go. I guess I would have been sleeping in my car, you know, not a worst case scenario type of thing. I'm not sleeping under a bridge, but still, you keep thinking to yourself, like, can it get any worse? Like, I mean, it definitely wasn't an ideal situation. It wasn't the worst situation, but when you're in the middle of it, it feels like that.
Every time some economic hardship or anything would happen in my life, I almost felt like it was riskier for me just to stay doing these low-paying jobs for forever where nothing was changing than to actually go all in on like trying to be a game developer. Like that was kind of a sensible thing to pursue. I felt like it was kind of the way out.
Well, that's it for this week. For all the greatest game news and editorials, be sure to follow at OneRuleBeCool on Twitter and Instagram. Follow me at Jordan_Cameron for my own views.